Why are church small groups so important, and how can we relate that and apply these concepts to the world of business? Our guest today is Adam Erlichman. He is a pastor, a consultant, and a best-selling author, and the founder of Build Groups LLC. And he's making a big impact in the group leader development and discipleship arena. Churches that have been working with him have had growth of up to 800%. And so it really is effective. And he actually created an excellent training resource, which I was so impressed by, called the Group Leader Training. And it is the first of its kind. And so we're going to talk about it here today. What are the different components of it, and how you can use it in your ministry, even your business. I really think there's some great correlations here to the world of business. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Adam, welcome to the Leaders Transformation.
Thanks for having me on, Nicole. I am glad to be here and to get to spend some time with you to dive into something that I am immensely passionate about, and it's what gets me up in the morning. So thanks for taking time to talk with me about it.
Yes, of course. My pleasure. And before we dive in, I do want to do a shout out to Kristen Cole. She is the founder of K Cole Communications. She's the one who introduced us. So thank you, Kristen. We really appreciate you and your support of this show. And we wouldn't be having this conversation if it wasn't for you. So thank you for that.
She's incredible. So double shout out.
Yes. We're really appreciative of you, Kristen, and wish you all the best in your business and continued growth and all of that. So let's dive in and talk about this idea of small groups and why are they so important. And we're going to talk about the church context, which is the area where you spend most of your time. And then I think we're going to find some real good correlations to leaders in the workplace that are also going to be listening as well.
100%. Small groups are significant for a lot of different reasons, but the one I'll probably, point out right away that I think is going to really translate to the church and also in the business world is the power of community, right? Of just the relationships and the trust that is fostered and built as a result of people not falling into community, not finding community, but forging community as they work together to build that through time spent together, invested, through text messages, through overcoming obstacles, through conflict resolution, maybe. There's all kinds of different facets of helping develop those relationships and building that community. And in many ways, Nicole, I think that businesses have tapped into the power of this sometimes a bit more than even the church has. And so what I get to do is that, I love to help churches recognize, realize, and bring about the power of small groups and how the gospel works through them to increase their groups by 30 to 50% in 6 to 12 months. That's kind of like what we help churches do. And just to let them see that community that's built, the small groups ministry, it's not the back door that keeps people from leaving the church or the organization. It is the elevator that takes you to new heights you didn't know you could even go for your business, for your organization, for your church. And it truly is, in a church context, it is the ship that raises, it's the tide that raises all ministry ships, if you will. It is the one ministry that strengthens every other ship out there and gets people onto the front lines to create a space where life transformation can happen. So that's just a few of the reasons why at a high level it is so important, small groups ministry.
It's funny because when Kristen reached out and recommended you for the show, I was like, oh yeah, this will be great to have him on talking about this. And I'm interested in this tool because I lead a small group and I also lead the small groups ministry at our church. And so when you're talking about the transformation and how it is the key, the catalyst, if you will, to the growth of the church, I've seen that. And also seeing the opposite of that when it's not present and not done well. And so talk a little bit about that. And you mentioned there's something really important about, you think that maybe businesses are doing it better than church. Why is that?
I don't know all the reasons for that. I don't know that I've read enough studies or conducted enough studies. We did a lot of data discovery and just recording through the process of putting together the group leader training workbook over a 6-year process, over 1,000 group leaders that went through that training, that we collected a lot of data, responses, and really helped us form at a practical frontline level what are group leaders facing, what do they need to know, and what tools do we need to provide to them to create that clarity and understanding to really minister in an offensive way that creates life transformation. And so, with businesses, I think at times you see that there's a little bit, money involved, right? Maybe. and that's not a bad thing. There's really good things. If you run a business, you should probably pay attention to that. You should be a great, good steward of the resources that God gifts you and blesses you with to utilize to advance the kingdom through the private sector. And so at times, I think a business can be maybe a little bit more motivated in some aspects of, if we don't take care of this employee well, if we do not treat them and create a space and environment for them where they can feel like they belong here, they are a part of the team, they're not working for us, but they're working with us, then man, they're going to have that churn, they're going to have that attrition of their employee. And then therefore, I mean, there's plenty of cost analysis out there of how much more it costs to just keep hiring and losing people as opposed to having someone for the longevity. And at times in the church, when you talk about data and you talk about metrics or even money, like it's almost kind of like an icky feeling, but in a sense, to me, it almost feels like there's been a punting of stewardship in those regards of, well, man, what if we looked at this a little bit different? What if we looked at this in the sense of, let's invest into people deeply on the front end instead of trying to attract more and more people to come in through the front door. Not that that's bad, right? It's great. We want new people to come in, but let's also, the other side of the train track, let's invest deeply into these people through having a great infrastructured, built out process with strong group leader training of people who can lead others to feel like they belong. It's not somewhere they go to on Sunday. It's something that they're a part of, they belong to. They're not working for the church. They are the church and they're working with the church.
Yeah. And, as you were saying that, I was thinking, wow, how many churches don't invest in their small group ministry? It's kind of like an extra add-on thing. Yeah, get together, a few of you get together and, do some fellowship and some study and pray together and all that's great, but not really being intentional about it. And when you build small group leaders who understand the value of that community and connection and fellowship and all of those things, they'll actually even attract those people. So it's like they're coming through, maybe not on a Sunday. Sure, there's going to be people coming on a Sunday morning who are going to see the sign or see on Google and they show up, but there's going to be church growth from people actually coming into the connect group or small group ministry and saying, hey, I heard about it. And that's been true at our church. I think about some of the people that have been very involved over the last couple of years in different areas of our church and how they came. Some of them actually came through our connect group, which I co-lead with someone else. And she invited some friends, and those friends are now really active in the church. And so, it's very overlooked and underutilized or underestimated, I guess, the importance of that in community building and church building, ultimately.
100%, Nicole. And the trend that we're seeing is as Christendom begins to decrease more and more, right? Christian culture in America, then biblical literacy is going to decrease as well. And so we will not get to make the same assumptions that we made before, that everyone understands what it looks like to live out biblical community or to follow in the faith journey of obedience to Christ, of what his commands. We can't assume that people know fundamental core beliefs and practices. And so with that, it goes right back to Acts chapter 2, verses 42 through 47, where the establishment of the church happened. That Apostle Peter preached the first sermon ever. 3,000 people get saved on the day of Pentecost. They get baptized, they repent. And then the next thing we see after that happens in Acts 2, 42 through 47 is everything the group leader training book is based on. right? That there's really four or five really big ideas in Acts 2:42 through 47, where you see the newly saved, the newly become Christians, 3,000 some people, they start meeting with one another regularly to fellowship. They begin to devote themselves to the teachings of the apostles and of Jesus Christ, right? So they're growing and they're learning, they're building community. Then they're selling and distributing their personal belongings and giving the proceeds to all and any who had need, because there's a greatly impoverished culture at that time. And then as a result of that, it says that the Lord gave them favor with everyone as they were doing home groups all over the place. And it said the Lord multiplied their numbers day by day, those who were being saved. And that's the power of groups. It's not just an internal strength of the church, it is an external strength that attracts people on the outside, where they look in and they go, I don't know that I even agree with what they believe, but man, there's something attractive, there's something awesome and just wonderful about this community and this group of people. I don't agree with everything, but I want to be a part of it. And
Yeah.
that's like what you see happen, and that's what we've seen happen again and again.
Yes, we have somebody who, one of those people that I was talking about, who is now very active in the church, who actually came to our Connect group and then ultimately started to get involved and in volunteering and so forth. They drive 45 minutes and they come on Sundays. They'll come during the week. They come, her husband, is helping in the worship team and media, sector, and she's working in kids. And so they're coming during the week all the time, and they're like really committed and they love it. And you can see how they're thriving and everything around them is, thriving because they're just on fire. Right. And wow. And that may not have ever happened if somebody had said, hey, would you like to come to church? And it's like, it's 45 minutes away. There's other churches, but they're coming for connection. That's where it started. And so talk about this importance. And I think there's a huge lack. You talk about the biblical teachings and literacy that is diminishing. The other thing that's diminishing is connection. We are more connected technologically and less connected emotionally than ever before. And, talk about that importance and what you've seen, in these small groups, the impact of actually having that connection developed.
Yeah. So the power of those connections, those relationships that are built through that, is that people begin to believe that they can do things they never thought they could. That the people that are surrounding them, other fellow believers in the faith, and don't get me wrong, like I'm not saying that Christian small groups and community is perfect, but what I am saying is that it creates that opportunity for people to come around and encourage and edify, where most of the things in the world are kind of taking or life sucking. Group is the one thing throughout that week that can be life-giving to a person, to a family, to a marriage, that gets them through all the things that they have in the week. So small group's not something to add to the week. It's something that, we've said this again and again, is it is what gets you through the week of all the things that you have to do. And as biblical literacy, as that increases, it's going to be so important for our group leaders to be trained so sound that there needs to be a high investment on the front end, not so high that it's impossible for anyone to reach the fruit of leadership. But what I see sometimes too is that people cut down the tree and that fruit of leadership is so low to obtain and grab with very little investment and training that the fruit is then rotten. And they're like, wow, this wasn't all it was cracked up to be, because it was done a disservice where it was, hey, show up to an interest meeting and, oh, this turned into your training. And now you start your group next week. And that could be a disservice and just kind of microwaving that process. Whereas instead, if it was, hey, let's go through maybe like 5 trainings over 5 months, or even 5 trainings over 10 weeks. And there's some level of commitment where they're getting to dig in, they're getting to ask questions, they're getting to really discern, is the Lord calling me to do this thing? And help them to think through the different scenarios that are very predictable that we see in small group, that there are even in just our first session of the group leader training, we lay out a lot of the landmines that people run into in the first 3 to 6 months that you can avoid to really propel your group forward so much faster into having longevity and having the sweetness without the bitterness of, some of the seeds and that fruit that can be born. And like, you're talking to a guy here, like, I became a Christian at 19. I came in completely biblically illiterate. I was like, who's Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John? Why do those guys matter? I'm walking into a church service going, why are they singing about some guy's blood being shed? And why is everyone excited and happy about it? Like, it was very foreign. And so what you will see more and more of as things continue to trend the way that they are, less Christendom, less biblically illiterate people, more and more people are going to not be showing up to church for Sunday morning service because it's going to be so foreign. It's not something you can assume they understand, that they're going to go probably into homes first. It's going to have to happen around a dinner table. It's going to have to happen in a one-on-one conversation or within a group of people where there is low level, no assumptions. Let's see where you're at. And those leaders have to be trained well, because if you can't get along with people that you agree with in the faith, and we say this all the time because sometimes people are like, hey, small groups, it's discipleship, but no, it's evangelism too. How are you going to reach people who believe differently than you if you can't even have a conversation and get along with people that do agree with you in the faith? And so there's a lot of different things that I threw out there, a lot of different ways that we really need to consider small group, implement into our ministry, maybe even business for sure as well. That it's just, man, that's just kind of where the culture is going. And this is going to be the primary vehicle that helps meet that pinch and pain that is not going to stop.
I never thought about it like that, that people are actually going to not be going on Sunday mornings as much or relate, like to your point. I'd love to hear maybe how you actually ended up there that day. And before we dive there, I was just thinking about how this correlates to business, is that it's not just the principle, right? There's practices and then there's principles. The principle is, it's not so much about building a department and establishing quote unquote relationships there and or a team so that you can get a function done. It is actually the function itself of building the team and the fellowship and the connection within the team, which helps grow the team and allows people to maximize their potential, which I'm really big about, right? Is helping people to maximize their potential and be everything that God created them to be. Well, in order to do that, you need an environment to thrive in. And so I just, that principle applies to business, it applies corporately, whether it's startup entrepreneurship, nonprofit, whatever, is this idea of building connection and community. We talk about it. I think most people don't understand how to do it, and they're doing it one-on-one, which is great, but doing it in that small group, you get a different dynamic from it. So I so appreciate you highlighting that. But yeah, you probably have some thoughts on that. And then I'd love for you to circle back and kind of tell us how you ended up at a church when you didn't know anything about this whole gospel.
Oh yeah, that's a story for you. And it's interesting when you look at exactly what you're talking about in churches and businesses and some of those principles, you find very similar mentalities that I think are harmful to helping people progress and perform at the top of their capabilities and capacities in a business, or to really become all that God has created them to be. And you see a lot of the same pitfalls. And some of that really is centered around using people for your own purposes without helping them fulfill what they really have a desire or a passion or a heart for. Now, I don't want to be overly idealistic and just be like, well, if you help them get what they want, then you can get, as Zig Ziglar has said in his book, right? If you help people get what they want, you'll get what you want. And there's a sense of in ministry that at times, man, there's not enough leaders. There's a leadership drought. They say 90% of churches have a leadership drought. I think that's probably true of most businesses as well, that there's this void of leaders who can manage people well and help them grow and, right, be developed into really all that they could be.
Absolutely.
And right. And so what we would tell people as we go through training, we would train our group leaders in this. This is in our workbook. And some might say, well, that feels maybe a little bit high level for a lay small group leader. And I'd say, nay, nay, I think that it's completely appropriate, right? And we saw it so many times where they would activate and mobilize people to step into spaces to use their gifting they never thought that they had or never thought that they could because they had the relationship with them and they could call out, I see this in you. We've been in group, we've been doing life together, or we've been hanging out together for 16 weeks or 2 years or 5 years. And I think you would be awesome doing this thing because I continue to see this in you. And they believe that person because they can look into the whites of their eyes and say that and go, you do know me. But for a pastor to come in who they have not spent, invest that time with them, have that relationship, it doesn't hold weight. It doesn't hold water. It's like a cracked cistern of trying to convey and pour into. And they're just like, yeah, well, you don't know me. So I'm not really going to believe you that would be good at that. And so we would tell our leaders, we don't use people for ministry. People are the ministry. And so in a workplace of the private sector and a business, man, what are people's passions like? What is their heartbeat? What do they love to do? What do they despise to do? And again, I don't want to be overly idealistic because some people have to work and grow and grit if it's like their first job out of college, right?
Sure.
and but at the same time, as they're working through and they're getting that work ethic developed or that grit, there is a place in there, a hot button that can be pressed, not for manipulative purposes, but to help fulfill the desires they truly have that they think is going to make a difference in their job and their workplace and help move that company forward, help move that business forward. And so I think when we stop using people in the church to accomplish what we think needs done, when we stop using people what we need done in business for our own self-seeking purposes and truly for the betterment of all those people, I think you're going to see a lot different results, like the results you actually really want to see.
Yes, you'll get what it is that you're actually looking for, but not from a different perspective and different way of doing it. So, yeah. Yeah, I think we're trying, it's like the definition of insanity, right? Forget who said it first, because boy, have they ever been quoted a lot. But this definition of an insanity
Mm-hmm.
is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. It's like I'm doing this and it's not getting me the result. Maybe I need to just do more of it. Well, hello. Maybe you need to do it in a different way. And when you put people first, to your point, and you help draw out in them what is the best in them, and you put people in a position to do what they're great at and what they love, yes, even while they're learning the grit and the discipline of some work habits and work ethic, you're still looking for what do they do well? What are they drawn towards? What are they curious about that maybe we can help them to develop into something more? So yeah, it's good. But tell us your story. I'd
Yeah.
love to hear. Yeah, how did you end up in church and now you're a pastor and this is your like life's work? Like, hello. How'd that
Yeah,
how'd that come to be?
certainly. Yeah. I want to say one more thing to that you were saying, because it was actually an interesting data point we discovered through the formation of the group leader training. I think it speaks a lot to this is right when we were going through and we were putting that process together and we were inviting people in to explore if this is something they felt called to do or that they would like to, we found again and again if we had a clear process with clear expectations that was easily communicated with the steps they could take, people who were like, I will never lead a group, they were far more willing to do it when we could show that to them.
Yeah.
And I think there's so much truth to that in the business world where, man, it can feel like sometimes you run around the chicken with your head cut off, just trying to keep up with this thing and that thing and get that thing done. And if there is you know, the urgent always overtakes the important, they say. And if we can put that important piece up front to say, here's what you're going to get to experience, here's how you're going to grow through this. And we, like you said, pay attention to those passions, what makes them come alive when they do it, because they probably don't even know themselves. They can't even articulate it. And you see that and you call it out, you draw it out, you feed it more. It's going to be some beautiful things. So, my story, I had a really good friend, my best friend growing up in my childhood and through high school. His name was Drew. And when I was like a sophomore, junior in high school, he's like, man, he's kind of encouraged by his youth pastor. And he said, hey, Adam, this is a legit conversation. This is how it went. Okay. Hey, man, you ever read the Bible? No, that was the first thing he said to me, right? It was just straight into it. So he was super nervous. And I was like, no, well, you should do that. Okay. I'll do that. I think there's a Bible down in the kitchen my parents have that is, somewhere down there. All right, bye. Legit how that conversation went. So that was sort of the initiation for me to start to go, okay, well, what? And it was like a KJV Bible. I opened up to Numbers, and that didn't last long. You know what I'm saying? So it was nothing to read for me that I was going to understand. And so, a few years go by, and I've maybe gone to a church service here and there, but I'm like, not a lot of it makes sense to me. He convinces me to go to Liberty University. I played ice hockey, for 18 years. I was recruited to go play at Penn State. That was like my dream. And I got hurt my senior year. Doesn't happen. So the Lord changes my path completely. Kind of makes me lose my life to begin seeking to find it in him. I go down to Liberty University, and it's like, holy smokes, this is an actual Christian university, man. There is curfew. There is no drinking. There is dress code. There is, no co-ed dorms. I mean, so different than what I was going to, maybe experience at Penn State probably. And not to hate on them, go Penn State, still a fan. And, so that's how I kind of stepped into that. And I'm going. And so I'm in all these Bible classes and New Testament 101, Evangelism 101. I'm just getting to hear the gospel preached. I mean, so powerfully from every different direction. And I'm skeptical and questioning that and questioning this. And I didn't have any of my questions answered, Nicole. And the Lord just saved me, like through a work of power through the Spirit, just convicted me. I needed to confess my sins, surrender my life, give my life to the Lord. I couldn't explain what was happening, and that's what happened.
Wow.
So, yeah, and I have never been the same since. I later on, a few years later, at that time I was studying business. I left school at 20, took a job as a director of operations, working at a local company, a company there in Lynchburg, Virginia, and then the Lord called me to ministry. I was like, man, I got to go back to school. And so from there, we served in churches in Virginia and Texas, and we've been in Texas now for I think about 9 years at a few different churches there. So, but now I do build groups consulting, and I do that full time and help churches strengthen in this exact area what we're discussing, and I absolutely love it. It is a joy and a privilege to get to see churches become more ministry minded and people centric. So yeah,
That's awesome.
it's kind of how all that happened. It was crazy. People, I'm still like, oh, I'm just a story, and other people are like, that's a crazy story.
Yeah, well, you think about what we were talking about, seeing things in others. Drew saw something in you, and whether that was just your being friends and knowing you and some of the conversations you might have had, or maybe it's just that Holy Spirit, which the secular world calls like intuition or some intuitive insight, but just that sense that, hey, I need to share this with you. And it's like when we're open to the path, when we're open and not resistant, and we're curious. And I love what you said there. None of my questions got answered. And yet, right, this is the path that I'm on right now, which I'm sure a lot more questions have gotten answered, right? So from that
They've
process.
all been answered since then.
Yeah.
But
I think sometimes there's that intellectual that we put forth, and I know I'm married to an engineer type, like his engineering mind. He actually has an engineering degree, and he's not working in that field right now. But he's a thinker, right? He's thinking through and the logic of it, and analyzing things and so forth. And you have questions. And there's a place to get those answers, right? And it's not just ignoring those questions, but there's something that supersedes those questions. And then the questions make sense in that context, if you will. That's a whole other podcast. Of course, we won't dive into there, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that the premier space that those questions should be happening in is a small group,
Yes.
right? Is in a home group and community with other people that you trust to know that you're safe to voice that question, to say, I'm doubting here.
Yeah.
And those people can go, we're going to be patient with you. We're going to be gentle about this. We're going to love you unconditionally. And it's okay to not be okay, but it's not okay to stay there. And honestly, Nicole, that was probably one of the biggest discoveries we made again, and through some of the data collection of putting group leader training together, was we asked this question. And this question, we got probably about 1,500 different responses from group leaders and those who were, joining a new group. We did this training with new group members coming into new groups who were launching as well. So we got even more data on it. And when you ask someone, well, what is one quality of a healthy group? The answers we got, there was a lot of predictable, repeated, answers you get again and again, common answers, transparent, loving, caring, supportive, open, vulnerable, all of those different things, right? Good things that a small group should be. The parts that were missing, that were almost never said or extremely uncommon, that were said less than 1% of the time, if that, some were 0%. There was 4 in particular that we saw, and they were all 4 tied together significantly, which were, number one, repentance. No one ever associated small group with a place that repentance should happen, which again is that, hey, it's okay to not be okay. I can come and confess my sins, but there was never sort of this turn to go, okay, but what are we going to do to step out of that not okay place forward to have progress? And then the second one was grace. Grace, which acceptance is one thing, but grace is completely different. Acceptance, hey, I'm okay with you being here. Grace was, or is, I'm okay with you being here and you have my favor. Like, I love you. I don't even know you. You don't even know me. You've done nothing to earn it, right? Grace is unmerited favor. The third was admonish, or to correct someone. Like, ooh, yeah, that's a warm and fuzzy one. I love thinking about that when I go to small group.
Said no
And
one ever.
yeah, so no, whatever, right? And so admonish was, or correcting them. Like, that's a key part in them knowing, okay, I need to make a step forward. It's not okay to continue in this way. And to progress and grow, I need to be corrected onto the right next step. And then the fourth one and the final one was transformation or growth. So the data that we discovered, what we found is that the majority of people who are in a small group, they see it as a supportive, help me survive type of purposed ministry, as opposed to something that's meant to help you grow and thrive and jump leaps and bounds to become more like Jesus. So they saw it more as defensive than they did as offensive. And when we could help people switch that mindset, the amount of stories of life transformation, of change, of steps of progress in their spiritual journey, it was significant. I mean, it was incredible. And I still, to this day, and I look back and I go, I can't believe that the Lord was doing this and this and this. People who are like, I'm never going to lead a group. And that same person is now leading a group and coaching like 10 other group leaders. That has multiplied. Like 300 plus people came out of their group. He wasn't going to start a group. And now that's what the Lord's done.
Wow. I love that. And I'm so glad that you cover that, because a lot of times when we talk about these topics of like leadership development, it's always in the positive, right? Like, also it's the growth, and it is the growth. And in that, it is the admonishment, it is the repentance, it is the different aspects of it that allow us to grow versus just the warm and fuzzies. And again, that's applicable to business, is to create that safe environment where you can challenge each other to be better. I think about one team that I was on where we had a code of honor, we had a standard, and we could call each other out and saying, hey, we agreed to play this game this way. And, you're not playing the game that way. Right. And we
Yeah.
agreed that we weren't going to do this. And you're doing that, right? Gossip or whatever the case is, and blaming or justifying or excuses or whatever it is. And it's like, hey, we are working together towards a common vision, a common mission. And, we need to challenge each other in that and call each other, be willing and being able to call each other out on that, not to, with a lot of grace of covering that, right? It's like not to criticize or judge people, but to call them up into something greater. And so it's so much more powerful. Before we finish, talk about how your training resource is structured. As I've already said, it is fantastic. I was so impressed that it's not just a book. It's not just it's that you put it together very intentionally. It is fantastic. And I've seen lots of different training programs, but not in this context, because this is the first ever in this context where I've actually seen it laid out like this. And it was just fantastic.
Thank you. That means a lot. I really appreciate the nice words and the kindness. And there was a lot of time invested, and we really wanted to make this a very holistic resource, that it was something that hit the head, it hit the heart, and hit the hands, right? That was informative. It stirred the affections, right? Of heart level, like, why does this matter? Like, why would I want to commit my week to a small group every week and these people? And like, here's why, right? And the best practices of how to facilitate and how to build relationships and how to, right, correct someone, not put them on blast before the whole group and destroy the foundation of trust and, transparency that you had and safety, but instead to correct in gentleness and in privacy, one-on-one, and, continue to foster that. Give them a reason to trust you more when you correct them with gentleness, not blow it up and spend your whole relationship capital on one correction. And yeah, so this resource, it's very holistic. It's got videos, and there are fill in the blanks that go with the video inside the workbook. And we have that for each session. And it's sort of a biblical basis that helps prime and prepare someone to come in and have that conversation, because there are discussion and training questions in there. We also have a doctrinal assessment so that they will answer those. And then there's a link for them to go online and look to see if they got it right or they got it wrong. And then there's articles and video links that they can click and dive into more if they're like, I want to understand more about that. I answered that wrong. I'm kind of curious, and they want to dig in more. It really created a safe place, I think, for pastors and leaders to have people explore what they believe rather than to just be told what they believe. Because if I sit here with you, Nicole, and I'm like, if I'm interviewing you potentially to be a new group leader, and well, what do you believe about this? What do you believe about this? It feels a lot like an interrogation, and it's not so fun.
Yeah.
But with that assessment, it makes it a lot more fun. And then there's the discussion questions, which the biggest thing about small group leader training, I think, that brings the most value is facilitating that training in the context of a small group. And so you bring in 8 to 10 potential new group leaders. Even if it's 3 to 5, you can still do that. And you don't just message to them what they should do, you model it. You don't just explain it, they get to experience it. And that's where I've seen the Holy Spirit just do such incredible things. And it was those trainings that we did hundreds of times with over 1,000 group leaders that we would record those responses, the information, where the conversation went, what the Holy Spirit revealed and opened up. And that's a lot of what informed the writing of the chapters that are in there. And like, I'm very passionate that I think books, I don't love fluff in books. I like efficiency. I like getting stuff done. And so I want a book that's just packed with meat, man. Just like, give me red meat. I don't need any fluff or cotton candy, this or that. And so that's kind of how we wrote it. That's how we tried to put it in there. 100 and, 60 to 70 page book that could have easily been 300 to 400 pages. But we made it concise, precise, so that the people, right, who aren't getting paid to do this sort of stuff, do ministry, they've got a job, they got a family, they got a pet, they got this thing, they got that they could look at this and go, wow, these people really value our time. There's a clear process. This is some of the best training. And we've had that. I mean, people who have been in Sunday school teaching for 40 years tell me, Adam, this is the best training I've ever had on this. This is, phenomenal. And so those types of affirmations were the thing that got us over the finish line to finish this book after 6 years. And you can go to buildgroups.net. You can find more about it there. It's for sale on Amazon. We do bulk orders that are 50% off if you order from our website, 10 copies of it or more. And yeah, so all that's there. We've got other resources and other free discipleship resources. If you create a free account on our website, you get access to more than a dozen free discipleship resources and assessments and all those good things.
Well, as I said, I thought it was fantastic, and thank you for making it concise. And I find that a lot of publishers will encourage authors to expand on it, expound on it, and make it a 300-page book. And then you're like, oh my gosh, this is going to take some time for me to go through. Just give me the meat. And as my husband would say, no rabbit food. I don't need any rabbit food. I just want the meat and potatoes. That's it. So
I like your husband. I like him. All right. Haven't even met him.
Yeah. So we'll make sure that your website, of course, is in the show notes as well. So if anybody's driving, they didn't write that down, it's all in the show notes. And I highly recommend it. I went on Amazon because even though you gave me an advance copy, I actually ordered a copy because it's that valuable. I want it on my shelf in my library. I want to be able to share it with others and to be able to do that with our small group leaders as well in our church. And I just highly, highly recommend it. And I was surprised because you have all the DVDs and all the videos and all the assessments. And I think it was only like $23.99. So amazing that you're providing all of that for that investment. And so it is truly investment. Even, and this is where I started up front talking about business, because many of our listeners aren't necessarily in a church ministry of sorts, but they're in business. Well, we could talk about that ministry in the marketplace, but the idea of applying this, I think just even from a framework of the principles of how you've laid it out and what you're sharing and why you're sharing it, super valuable for any leader in business and very, very applicable. And you can then translate that into your context. So I highly recommend you get a copy of Adam's book. And again, Adam, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate you and all that you're doing. You are definitely building and developing leaders of transformation. So we're excited about that.
That's what I like to hear. That is, if you cut Adam, that's what bleeds out, and that's what gets me up in the morning. So thanks so much, Nicole, for having me on.
It was a pleasure. And just on cue, our landscaper came back and is now blowing. And so there's noise in the background, but we're glad that it was quiet for our conversation here today. But anyway, thank you again for being here. Thank you to our listeners and our viewers, and hope that you enjoyed this and got something out of it. We'd love to hear your stories. Post the comments below if you're watching the video. Reach out to us on leadersoftransformation.com. You can find us there. You can, of course, find us on social as well. And subscribe, share it, and you get connected. Even yourself, get connected. Start somewhere. If you're not in a connect group or a small group, they have different names for it. Life group, sometimes they call it. You know what? Why don't you check it out? Check it out. Go to your local church. Find out if they have a small group ministry and explore it for yourself so you can get connected and enjoy the benefits of it. And you never know where it's going to go. So we encourage you to do that. We appreciate you, and we look forward to seeing you next week on another episode of the Leaders of Transformation.